So, good morning or good night, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to a brand new episode of Is It That Bad, where we take a look at an album that maybe got mixed reviews and maybe some people didn't like it, and we listen to it years later and we say if it's really that bad. So, for this episode, I'm joined again by JC Rock and Metal Reviews. JC, how are you?
No, good, thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're joined for the first
Yeah.
time on this show because I interviewed him, Francisco Mesa. Francisco, how are you?
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And finally, we have Nick Sino. Nick, how are you today?
Good, Hector. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So, you know the drill, people. We have the 3 rounds. The first round, we give our initial thoughts of when we listen to this album. Round 2, we pick the songs that we think are the weakest. And for this one, we're not going to pick 3. We're going to pick 2, and I'm going to explain why in a little bit. And then the third and final round, where we give it our final thoughts, and then we give it a thumbs up, thumbs sideways, or thumbs down. So today, I can't believe I'm going to be talking about this band because when I think of bad, I don't think of this band. But my idea for doing this is I saw a video for Notes Reviews where he did like a video where it was like good bands that have that like one stinker. But he didn't pick this one from the band we're going to talk about. It's a band from Canada, very well known, and it's the band Rush. And this is the album that we're going to be talking about. It's Caress of Steel, came out originally in September 24, 1975. So I wasn't even alive when this came out. But I was reading that apparently this album, when it came out, you know, the band was really proud of it, but it was their first album that got like very mixed reviews. And they even say, Geddy Lee said in an interview that he thinks it's their worst album. So I thought, like, if Geddy Lee says that, I'm like, we can talk about this album. So yeah, we're talking about Rush, Caress of Steel. So we're gonna start the round with JC. So JC, initial thoughts listening to this record.
Okay. So it's funny. I've been a Rush fan for a long time. I listened to Moving Pictures. I think I was about like 10 years old when it came out, and I've been a fan of Rush, most of that album. And I prefer Rush like their period from like the 70s period, but for some reason I never like knew this existed for until like not that long ago, maybe I don't know, another like 8 or 10 years ago. Because for some reason, I guess it's one of those albums that like doesn't get a lot of like attention. I know like their album like Fly By Night, that one has a really cool cover with the owl on it. They got that one. And then 2112, that's like a masterpiece. And everything like after Farewell to King's Hemispheres, Permanent Waves, those are like all my favorites. And then after that, I kind of like them, but I'm not like, you know, crazy about the albums after that. But anyway, I listened to this a couple years ago, and then I listened to it again to prepare for this. And I thought it was okay, but it's definitely not as good as the ones that come after it. But I think this was their first attempt at like trying to be a progressive rock or a progressive hard rock, whatever you want to call them, because their first 2 albums, the self-titled Rush and the Fly By Night, were more like blues rock, more like a Led Zeppelin type of rock. And this was the first time they attempted, or they did a little bit on Fly By Night, but this was the first time they like had like an album with long songs, the progressive epics. And I think they just like didn't like perfect what they were doing. Like they would perfect it on their next album, 2112, because that's like possibly one of the best. But I listened to it again. I think there's a couple songs that maybe some of their are some of their weaker ones, but I think there's still some good stuff on here. So I'll give my my final verdict at the end. But I think it's it is one of their weaker ones. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was reading. Yeah, it was their first attempt
Yeah.
at doing this style, and the last song was like their first song that the last song is the whole side of the vinyl, just
Yes.
one song. So yeah, and so what about Francisco? You actually play in a Rush tribute band. Like I was wondering.
Shameless plug here, right here. This is the band, so shameless plug. Yeah, and I'm gonna be shunned by probably the rest of the band and some of our followers because I'm gonna have to confess it's the first time I hear this record in its entirety just a couple of days ago when you invited me to the call, right? So these are like really truly fresh opinions of someone that again has never heard it before. We've played a couple songs, Bastille and Lakeside Park, and that was it. I'm sort of on a need to know basis when it comes to more Rush tunes since your brain can only hold so much, right? But yeah, the impressions, like JC said, I'll give my final verdict at the end, but it was a tough listen for me. So that will probably give you a hint of where I'm going at, but it's also maybe not fair since I'm listening for the first time a record that came out, more than 40 years ago, right? So it has good moments. It has moments that I regret listening to, and yeah, maybe we'll get into that a little bit more as the conversation progresses.
Yeah, this album's going to be 50 years old next year.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's about to turn 49. So what about you, Nick? Because you're also from Canada, but apparently I thought all Canadians love Rush, but
Well, that's the thing. If you're in Canada and if you don't love Rush and you don't love the Tragically Hip, they kick you out of the country. They're like, you can't live here anymore because those are the two Canadian bands that Canadians hold in like ultimate esteem is Rush and the Tragically Hip. And I appreciate Rush. Like I don't think it's a band that I really reach for very often, but I obviously like appreciate their talent and their status within the world of Canadian rock music. And I played a lot of Rush during my radio days. Like I didn't listen to a lot of Rush before that, but then we played a lot of Rush on the radio station. So I'd always sit in the studio with the headphones on and just listen to all their crazy instrumental stuff. And I was reading that Rush said they were high during the recording of this album. And I think you have to be just maybe a little bit in that direction to enjoy it. I was actually at work, so I was stone cold sober when I should have been at home, enjoying maybe something, an extra little effect at home. But the thing is, like, I didn't love this record, but I can understand why, at the time and even now, like why so many rock fans love Rush. They were an epic band, and even listening to this record at work, there was so much like ear candy to enjoy, especially on those two sidelong songs that they did. They're like so epic and so cool. Maybe a little bit long. Like you have to have a really long and good attention span to be listening to a 20-minute song all in one go. But I'm not a Rush expert or anything, but I didn't really think this was as bad maybe as people were saying it is. I think it was like we were saying it was kind of like the transition to 2112. It was like that record that they made that established them as being this epic rock band that everybody knows and loves. So yeah, I didn't think it was too bad.
yeah, it's Geddy Lee who said it, not me.
Yeah.
So for me, I've listened to some Rush, but for some reason I didn't know this album. I knew the first two, but I don't know why. After this, I thought it was 2112. So I was like, oh, there's an album in between. And listening to this, because this is the first, I remember listening to Bastille Day, because that's a song that it was like the single from that. But listening to this, because I listened to it this week to prepare, I thought that this sounded like a band, because the album sounds kind of disjointed, because the first two tracks sound like more rock bluesy, and then they go on an acid trip or something with the last ones. And I think it's the first time they were trying that. So they still weren't like Rush. They hadn't perfected that side of them. And it's 1975. I don't think people were used to those super long tracks at that moment. So I'm thinking when it came out, I even read that they did a tour, and the tour was like making fun, like this was their going down tour, they were almost dropped, I think, from the record label, because this record performed very poorly. but I think it's like a transition record. It's that record that needed to happen. Like it's ballsy. It's not that long. It's like 43 minutes, but it's like 5 songs. But for me, listening to it, I'm not gonna lie, there were some parts that I was wishing that the song ended. And like the transitions in the song, especially the long songs, to me were kind of weird. Uh, so yeah, this is an album that it's mixed. Obviously, it's Rush, and boy, have we talked about crappy albums here. So there's no way to compare Rush to, like, let's say, this to Dream Theater, The Astonishing, which is an atrocious long record in my opinion. So yeah, those are the first like opinions of us listening to this. So now we're going to round two. So since this album only has 5 songs, I'm thinking instead of picking 3 songs, I think pick the two that we think are the weakest. So JC, which 2 tracks did you pick and why?
Okay, I'll go with track number 2. I think I'm going bold. It's just kind of like a silly song. It's humor. Like it doesn't like feel like like Rush. Yeah, I think of Rush, and I'm thinking like all these like nerdy like sci-fi lyrics and like telling stories. This is just kind of like I don't know. It's kind of like it's it's about like a fear of aging or something like that. But I think it just doesn't really seem like a kind of very memorable or great Rush song. I think it's also often considered like one of the weakest tracks, even though it's kind of like a little more simple. And then Rush, they always have these like complex different arrangements and like the thoughtful lyrics. And I think this one is just kind of like one of those like filler tracks. And then I'm gonna go with one of the longer ones, and I think it's track 4, the Necromancer, only because I think this one it just like it feels like a bunch of like ideas put together. Like it feels like it doesn't feel like a whole song where it's like going from like one to the other. It just kind of feels like a bunch of ideas. Like there's some parts that are pretty cool where like they're actually like Rush at their heaviest where they're playing like the distorted guitar riffs. Like that was cool. But then there are other parts you feel like they go on like to these other sections. Sometimes it's like psychedelic and sometimes it's sounds a little weird. So I think that one is not one of their better epics. I thought like the one on side 2, the long one, was probably a little better. But that's it. That's my 2. So it's my 2 is I think I'm going Bold and the Necromancer.
Okay. What about you, Francisco?
Yeah, for me, the 2 long ones, Necromancer and the Fountain of Lamneth. Several reasons. I think they are just way too long. And you obviously have long songs like in 2112, like the title track, and it's incredible. It's amazing. It's well thought out, well put together. This one feels somewhat like what JC said, a bit disjointed. I think both have good parts, but that makes it bittersweet, right? Because you have like such a great part, and you're thinking that it's gonna either end here or it's gonna go this other place that makes sense, and it doesn't. And then you hear the narration, and the narration is kind of cringy. I don't know, at least to me. So it's that's in Necromancer specifically talking about that one. But yeah, both have very little good parts to my liking, and just a big chunk of nonsense. So those are the 2 that I picked as the worst ones.
Yeah, good picks. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with JC. With I think I'm going Bald. It's definitely not the best Rush song in the bunch. And I was reading that the song was written as a reference to Kim Mitchell, who was a member of Max Webster, and who's another kind of Canadian singer from the 70s and 80s. And like between him and Rush, it's just like a section of Canadian music that I've never really, as a Canadian, like never really gravitated towards. It's like I was maybe a little bit too young for them to be something that I would really get into at the time. But the thing is, it was about Kim Mitchell, and Kim Mitchell is bald now. So I guess this song was very prophetic that he was gonna be losing all of his hair. Neil Peart, he called it on this one. And the thing is, like I said, like I appreciate Rush, but it's like with this and the other song that I didn't really like, which is the Necromancer. It's like they're doing so much, but yet I'm just not really interested in it at all. Like they're obviously playing their hearts out and doing a really great job playing, but I'm just not really super interested. So yeah, the Necromancer was one of those. I feel like this was listening to Rush's version of Pink Floyd's "Shine On You Crazy Diamond," but maybe not quite as cool and quite as epic as that song. But this is like the thing that we were saying. This is like the first album that Rush made where they were making these really, really long songs. So it's like they unlocked the next level of Rush, the next level of the game of Rush. Where they started becoming this epic rock band. And there is some pretty cool stuff in here, and instrumental wise. Like I said, there's so much ear candy when you're listening to Rush. Obviously, it's very interesting to listen to, but just not anything I can sing along to. Not really anything I can get into that much. So I would say, yeah, those two. I think I'm going Bald and the Necromancer were the weakest for me.
Yeah. And I was reading that when they put out this album, a lot of their contemporaries were like, what the hell are you guys doing? They were asking them. So I too picked the song about I Think I'm Going Bald, because when I was listening to it, first of all, I saw the track list and I saw that I'm like, this doesn't sound like a Rush title. They're geeky, they're intelligent. And I thought when I was listening to it that it was going to be like a David Lee Roth song, like, I think I'm going bald. That would have like worked more as a David Lee Roth solo song. But yeah, and I was listening to the song, I'm like, yeah, it's about someone's fear of going bald. So I thought it was like very stupid lyrics. I'm like, oh my God, this is almost like a Tenacious D type of lyrics. Like they're trying, I don't know if they're trying to be funny or serious. So for Rush, I was like, it felt very weird. And I don't know, that song feels like very out of place on this record. Like, I don't know, the other songs, like, I don't know if there's like more of like a theme, but that one seemed like very random and over the place. So I would pick that. And for the second one, it's going to be one of the long songs, but I was debating which one, but I think it's the Fountain of Lamneth. It's like 90 minutes. And the problem with this song, there's like 3 times in this song, like where they go mute and you think that the song is ending, but then it goes back again. But I'm like, it doesn't make sense. Like the way the transitions seem very like forced and sloppy to me. And it's just so long and I was bored out of my mind. And yes, there's some snippets of greatness there, but it's like all stitched together. They were probably doing that song like, let's throw shit, see what sticks, and it's a song. And the Necromancer, even though it's long, it's 13 minutes, but so it's a little bit shorter. But my problem, I picked the last one because the last one had like 3 times where it seems like it was gonna stop, but then it began and it almost sounded like a different song. I'm like, this isn't cohesive at all. I'm like, what the hell is this? So yeah, it was a supremely bizarre track. And 2112, they have a long track, but it's awesome. So it's their first try was a miss, but you know what? Kudos to Rush for doing it again. Even though I'm sure when they were going to put out 2112 and that long song, maybe the record producer or the label told them, are you going to do this again? But it was the other way around. So yeah, those are the 2 tracks that I would pick. So now we're going to the third and final round where we give our final impression of this album. We rate it thumbs up, thumbs sideways, or thumbs down. So JC, your final thoughts and rating?
Okay. Well, first of all, it has some good stuff here. I think like Bastille Day is a great song. I think it's like, possibly one of their best. And it's a super catchy song. So I think that might kind of almost save the album. But it, like I said, it did have the 2 ones I didn't like I think I'm Going Bald and Necromancer. But then there's Lakeside Park, which is it's a pretty good song as well. I think it's kind of like, they're showing kind of like somebody a softer side in this one, and it's a decent song. But I think as far as like the the Rush catalog. I don't think it's like their worst. I don't know. It's like it's towards the bottom in a ranking, but I would say like some of the other ones that aren't that great, like it's this one, there's like Presto, that one like wasn't great, and then some of the ones, like the later ones, maybe Tespereco, those were kind of like the weaker ones. But
I think
I'm gonna go
counterparts from the
sideways. I think
90s. Yeah.
yeah, some of those from the 90s, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna go thumb sideways. I think the song I think like the Bastille Day and Lakeside Park are gonna save it. Just for those two songs, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why I go
Good. So we
sideways,
got
yeah.
our first voting, from sideways. So Francisco, your final thoughts on this and your rate
Yeah.
and your vote.
Yeah, so agreeing with JC, Bastille, it's a hell of a song. I love playing that song. It's a highlight for me in the show. It's a great rocker, straightforward, but so much full of energy. The other one that we played, Lakeside Park, which I mentioned before, I really don't like that one. So you only gave me two options to pick the worst ones, but I think this is a four bad out of and one good. So it's pretty bad on my list. I definitely give it a thumbs down. It's a shame.
You have to
Because
show
there's
the
again,
thumbs down. People
I
need
need
to
to.
see the
Okay, got it.
thumbs
It's my
down.
first time. It's my first one, like a big one. Let me zoom in into that. So but yeah, it's a shame because again, there's really good parts in the Necromancer. There's like I was and Nick said it perfectly. There's some great ear candy, especially for a guitar player. Like clean guitar on this side, volume swelling on the on swells on this side, and then sort of a solo going in the middle. It's really well mixed, but then they ruin it with parts that make no sense. And similar with the Fountain of Lamneth, I made a note here. Some really cool, dark, arpeggiated guitar, and it's unlike to hear that kind of moody, dark tones from Rush. And then again, they ruin it. So I just don't think they were, or at least to my taste, whatever, which is pretty sure not relevant to many, but it's just not well put together. So one song cannot save the record. So it's a thumbs down.
Okay, we got our first thumbs down. So what about you, Nick?
Yeah, I don't really know why, when maybe Geddy Lee and maybe other Rush fans have given it such a hard time. I think it's a pretty standard Rush album. It's very well written, well performed, great lyrics from Neil Peart, and it's like we were saying, that signpost for future albums. I don't know if like without this they would have made 2112. It was like that stepping stone that they had to make. They had to try these things out. I was reading with this album, it was a commercial and critical failure for them. And when they went to go make the follow up, they were going to make, the record label wanted to make something super commercial, but they still kept going into the direction of making something really, really big and artistic. So I think this was a good way to get to that. And to me, it doesn't really sound any better or worse than any of the other Rush stuff that I like. Lakeside Park was really the only song familiar to me because that is a song that gets played on the radio a lot here in Canada. So yeah, I don't really think this will make me a big Rush fan. It doesn't really move the needle for me either way, whether I'm I still just appreciate Rush the same way that I always have. So I always appreciate their musicianship, and I appreciate the influence that they've had in the world of rock. So it's always kind of for anything Rush for me, it's always a thumb sideways for sure.
Okay, so we have two thumbs sideways and a thumbs down by a man that plays in a Rush tribute band. That's that's very ballsy. So
But they have so many other good stuff, right? So
yes, yeah, this is a weird album to vote and talk about because I don't hate it, but I also don't love it. It's it's like a failed experiment. But Bastille Day, I think, is their truly great song on this record, and I can see why they played that one live. But I also believe, like Francisco, that it has more stinkers than good ones. So I'm actually gonna give this a thumbs down. this is not a good Rush record, you know. Like there's moments of brilliance on some of the longer tracks, but I think there's more bad than good stuff, and it's incoherent. So we have two thumbs down and two thumbs sideways. So I'm guessing this it's slightly safe. It's almost that bad. So, but yeah, I was really thinking hard how to rate this, but then I'm like every time that I listened to it, it felt like a chore. And when like an album feels like a chore to listen to, I'm like, I'm sorry. Even I'm not gonna give it a pass only because it was Rush. And yeah, there's some drum parts that Neil Peart, it sounds awesome, but it didn't benefit the song. I'm like, it was just there to be there. It didn't make sense. So yeah, unfortunately, I would have to say that from the Rush albums that I listened to, yeah, this would be more in the bottom. Like so yeah, so there you have it. So this is an impasse. We have two thumbs down, two thumbs sideways. So I think it's like slightly safe. It's almost that bad. I think everyone can say here that it's one of the Rush weakest albums, and I can see why Geddy Lee would say in interviews that he thought that yeah, this was one of their weakest records. But kudos to the band for staying true to themselves and doing 2112, where everyone was like, wow, so they did it. So we want to know from you, Couchers, what do you think of Rush Caress of Steel? Do you think would you give it a thumbs up, thumbs sideways, or thumbs down? What are your what do you think are the worst tracks from this record? And if you like the videos, please subscribe to all the people who are here. So JC Rock and Metal Reviews, he has his channel where he does album rankings, he does album reviews. So subscribe to his channel, and he collaborates a lot on my channel. And Francisco, he's got, what's the name of your channel, Francisco? Because I know you have one where you play the guitar and you put your solo stuff there.
Yeah, you can just find me at Francisco Meza Music.
Yeah, and like I recently interviewed him on the channel as well. So and so when I felt like, hey, I can ask him since he plays in a Rush tribute band. So subscribe to his channel. He does covers as well. So and he has what's the name? You have a solo album, Textures, that came out a few weeks ago. So you can check it out for his music and subscribe to his YouTube channel. And finally, Nick Zeno, like if you're ever wondering what happens with Oasis, he'll give you a week by week play. Like did Liam Liam and Noel spotted in a bathroom together? Like,
Yeah.
like he'll make a video about it, and you know he's also in a band, Fools Union. You can follow his band as well. And you know, subscribe to his channel. I do some videos also on his channel as well. So if you're checking this out, we did a video this week where we talk about Blink-182. So check that out in his channel. And finally, my channel, you know, interviews. I do album reviews. And coming up next for this, since Linkin Park is back, my good friend Rock of All Ages said, we need to do a Linkin Park album. He said to do the last one that put out in 2017. I'm like, but that's such an easy video. Everyone knows that album is bad. So I think we're doing Stranger or Living Things from 2012. Because, you know, I'm like, yeah, let's do one that is more interesting to talk about. So we're going to talk about that album for next Sunday on Is It That Bad? So until next time, Couchers, this is Hector, the Shield Dude on a Couch, and we'll see you next time on another episode of Is It That Bad? Thank you and goodbye.